How are we doing, friends? Good. We are a small but mighty crew, so we wanted to invite those of you in the back to come up closer. If you'd like better visuals, we'd like to see your faces. We want you to have a chance to talk with our filmmakers. So by all means, if you're in the back and you'd like to, no one's forcing you, but please feel free to move forward. Good morning and welcome. My name is Kat Evans. I serve on the Adult Ed Committee currently. We are so excited that we have Jack and Dinesh with us this morning, the filmmakers for How Not to Build a School in Haiti. Before we get to our amazing discussion, I'll begin with a word of prayer. God, we are a motley crew, but we showed up today. Thank you for your love. Thank you for being there for us. Thank you for the rushing force that can change the world. Guide us, help us to listen. Go deep into our hearts. Thank you for your love and for each other. Amen. All right, before we get in, I must commercial for the later on adult ed offerings, the beautiful murals of Frederick Bartlett, a primer in historic art conservation, including at Fourth Church. Sunday, September 10th, right here in the Borwell Dining Room. It will be on Zoom and it will be live and in person. What did I say? Rats. Rats. December, as in next week. And then Julie's gonna talk about the creche class that we have coming up.
So I am navigating a mic here, reading glasses, and a cell phone. But anyway, so on December 17th, we are going to be having Kyle Mathers, who is the curator and manager of LUMA, which is Loyola University's Museum of Art. And they have a creche exhibit there. They have 100 nativity scenes from around the world that are part of a exhibit that was donated to them by James and Amelia Govan. And so he's going to be talking about the art and the history and the faith around creches. However, there is also the exhibit there at LUMA, but it is only going until December 17th, which is also the day of our lecture. So I wanted to let everybody know that if you wanted to go to the lecture, the exhibit either that day or before, do consider that, because it is an awesome thing to go and check out and just kind of see how creches have been interpreted from around the world, from different cultures and different religions. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Julie. All right, before we talk, let's watch the trailer for the film. Can we cue that up, Fred or Jana?
Magnitude earthquake has hit Haiti a couple hours ago.
Reports of extensive damage are coming from the capital, Port-au-Prince.
It was a massive response from the media, and the media response happened faster than the humanitarian response.
Et comme ça, yo même histoire ça yo prend avec nous, y a le passé sur radio aux États-Unis, commencer le cob nan numéro compte ça pour nous.
I just believe in education. So that's what touched me when I heard this story. I wanted to use my experience in construction to help someone that really needed it. How hard can this be?
What I would like to know is, when is the construction starting?
Tomorrow. Amen. I really thought that we could just translate from a picture to the work. It hasn't worked.
Everyone's coming in with their own baggage. For a Haitian, you may see a white person. You may say to yourself, how can this person help me? If I allow this person into my life, how will it hurt?
I will leave immediately. It's done.
This school might be a little project, but for the village, it's a big project.
I'm tired of the games that he's been playing with me.
Relation avec Tim, li pas même gens avant.
Yeah, I thought I could make a difference. Probably not making any difference here.
All the models that people keep trying to push on Haiti end up failing. You can blame Haitians for just not fitting in. That's fine if you then want to walk away and shake your head. Or you can wonder whether the fact that it's failing, rather than being a problem with Haiti, it might be a problem with the model.
Awesome. Thank you. So we don't get to talk to filmmakers terribly often here at church. And the first question I wanted to put to our director and cinematographer was, what for this documentary went as normal to help us learn about what documentary filmmaking is like? What for this particular film went like most documentaries? Talk to us about what went well or what went normally.
So thanks for having us here, and we're happy to share. And for those of you who watched the film, just so I have some reference. Oh, okay, great, wonderful. For those who haven't, hopefully this makes some sense. Also, Kat told me when we chatted on Friday that I should tell everyone that I was raised Presbyterian. That would help in some way or be meaningful. I grew up in the burbs in Glen Ellen. It was First Presbyterian Church. I don't know. Does that mean it's 3 better or
3 worse?
3 worse? Okay. That's all the jokes I have about Presbyterianism. To answer the question about what went well, I think partly when I hear that question, and it sort of in the spirit of being an artist and trying to talk about in those ways, is I don't know. I can't answer that question almost because I didn't know how to make a documentary. This project took 10 years to realize. So we started it in 2010, 11, right after the earthquake, which happened in January 2010. And I had heard the story, and we all heard the story, and the response. And I was like, wow, this should be, there's something here, like the story about, can Americans go elsewhere and help? And that seemed to be the narrative that was happening at the time. And I was really taken by it, but I couldn't find any there was no way to tell the story. And so then it became this NPR Planet Money program started investigating rice and how foreign aid works. And then they found this school, which we ended up documenting. And I was like, man, this would make a great film, but I don't know what to do. I went to school for fiction filmmaking. I made comedy films. Documentary is not something that I had ever thought about doing. And then finally, the NPR finally did a story where they found Tim, and Tim was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to build this school. And I was like, okay, an American, I can do this. Like, cause I don't speak Haitian Creole. I have never been to Haiti, but I know. So I found Tim and just started filming. And my very first trip down was 5 days. 2 days in, I destroyed the camera that I flew to Haiti with, because I had a water bottle in the bag. And so I destroyed the camera and then rented a really terrible camera down there because there's just not a lot of cameras down there. Came back. And so to answer your question, the answer is nothing went right or everything went right. And it was a huge learning curve. It took us from 2011 to 16 to film it. And then it took us about 4 years to edit it, which is not abnormal. It's maybe on the slightly long side, but not wildly on the long side. And then Dinesh got involved because we had met in the community, and I was sort of fumbling my way through the beginning of this documentary process, knowing that I really wanted to try to find a way to tell this story, but not really understanding either the form of documentary at all, and understanding that I needed help. And so then, and maybe Dinesh, you can jump in here too. We met because he had more documentary experience than I did, and was like, I remember we met at the Intelligentsia on Randolph, and I was like, do you want to make this movie with me? And you were like, yeah.
I think I said, like, this is why I became a doc filmmaker, is to tell stories like this. I think a lot of doc filmmaking is improvisation. A lot of art making is improvisation, right? At least that's been my experience. If there was a kind of formula you could apply, then it perhaps would not necessarily be art. I don't know, depending on how you define it. But yeah, to Jack's story, I would add 2 things. One is, films like this take time, and it is well known, right? In our community, they say 7 years is about par for a feature-length observational documentary. That is a number, but then when you live those 7-10 years, all of a sudden it's like, wow, that was 10 years. Like, so just like that was kind of planned, but also just, I think the actual experience of it was just, it felt different. I think the other big thing, and this is kind of baked into how we told the story in the film, is just, I think both of us, Tim, Sam Pleece, everybody walked into this situation with an idea of what they thought was happening. And I think as filmmakers, we walked in with like, oh yeah, I know this story. It's going to go like this. And then it didn't go like that. And then we adapted, and then it didn't go like that again. And we adapt. And that level of improvisation, I think, was both, I think we kind of intellectually understood, but just in practice, that was something really, really interesting.
When part of why I thought this could make a good film or was that we had baked in a structure, no pun intended, but it was we're going to watch them build a school. So it's like there's not going to be a school, then you're going to watch them building the school, and then there's going to be a school built. And so I knew that. And that might sound silly, but that's enough to like hang your hat on. That's enough of a skeleton to start building from. And pretty early on, we did know that. It's like, okay, but then it becomes like almost like, okay, we're going to just take multiple shots of the school at different parts in time. So you see, here it is not built, here it is partially built, here it is finished. But what is happening in between? I mean, that's the 90% of the movie, right? And that's the stuff that's interesting. And those are the things that are unexpected. So to a certain extent, like we sort of did know big picture what this was going to be and had enough to be able to sort of plot our course, but that actually doesn't even really do it justice to what we truly found, you know, to Dinesh's final point.
Great. Okay, I have one more question about just the making of the film, and then we're going to open it up to you all because we really want to hear your questions. Can you talk a little bit about funding to create a movie like this? I mean, we talk a little bit about in the film about how Tim went about raising funding for his project, but can we talk about funding for films? And when you have an idea and a mission and something you're excited about, how do you go about this?
You want to start, Jack?
I'll start. This one specifically, I can answer a number of grants, small grants, DCASE and a couple other ones. We did two Kickstarters for this. I think 2 Kickstarters for this back when Kickstarter was like new and cool. And then I direct commercials, I direct feature like fiction films. And so for this one, I would just take any money that I was making, like directing stuff, getting paid decently, and just dump it back into this. And then a lot of people were working for, you know, not anything or very, very little. So just trying to keep costs down. It's very difficult to come up with a, you know, longitudinal documentary budget that, you know, where people can make a living wage while making these films, just to be totally frank. Yeah.
And by like the textbook version of a film like this would have the budget probably would have been several $100,000, if not, you know, in the millions, just given it was, you know, 10 years, given that it involved a lot of travel. You know, we shot about 300 or so hours of footage, and that, you know, takes a lot of time to go through with an editor. Usually you're hiring an editor for a year or more at that point. So again, all these costs going to add up. And the independent doc ecosystem, you know, there are small grants that Jack mentioned through the city of Chicago, other places. And then PBS has a pretty vibrant ecosystem of co-production and programming. And we pursued those pretty actively and got pretty close and got some good feedback. And it's just incredibly competitive. And, you know,
agendaized. They have an agenda.
Yeah, true. I mean, they answer to kind of fund their own kind of powers that be. And it's pretty tricky. And I think in the doc community, it's pretty well established that this system is largely broken of funding. In fact, there's a webinar, I think it's on Tuesday. It's like, how to fix the broken docs. Like they just, it's in the title. Like people know it's really become very, very difficult. But again, a lot of these projects like ours, just kind of funded basically on passion, right? On just like, we see this story and we just want to see it get into the world.
Yeah. Which that I believe is something we at Fourth Church can really relate to, right? So much passion and care for what we want and how much we want to take care and take care of each other. So I'd love to pose, yes, I'll come to you. I do want to encourage you all to ask both questions about filmmaking and documentary in general, as well as talking about the content of this movie. So can we talk about perhaps some filmmaking questions earlier, and we'll get them out of the way, and then we'll get into the weeds. So did you have a filmmaking question or content?
No, it's a filmmaking question.
All right.
It affects the content, but
just for the people on Zoom.
Hi, my question is my assumption is that you walked in there, and I'm reiterating, I think what I heard from you. You walked in there with the plot being, we understand they're going to build a school. Okay, but my question related to that is, did you do any research yourselves on other things that have been filmed in Haiti or other situations like this? Or did you read anything about the country or economics or, any background? I'd just be interested in that. That's a good question.
That is absolutely
Dan.
a film question. It's a process. It's a process question. Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, yes to all those things. So once we sort of, I guess once I started on it, because I was alone for a little bit at the beginning, just like, I'm going to do this, you just start reading everything you get your hands on. And that would be Haiti specific or international economic development more broadly, the history, what's going on currently, and then just start going out and talking to literally anyone who will talk to me about anything. So it's like the amount of conversations I've had about just aid in Haiti is, I mean, hundreds of people just constantly.
So 300 hours of film, but more hundreds of background work.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of what documentary, I think the best work you can do in documentary probably doesn't happen on screen necessarily. The most important work happens. It's like the tip of the iceberg, it's only 10% is above. And so there's just a lot, and this goes in for fiction filmmaking too. Most of the work that I do when I'm directing a fiction film, you don't see storyboards and previs and meetings with my department heads and like all that stuff is not seen, but you see it in that it shows up in the footage. And so, one of the things is like just making sure that you're well prepared. So we have some pretty amazing experts in here who teach courses on this stuff. So it's like, how do you read enough so that you can go in and not seem like a total idiot? So the partial idiot.
Total.
So do you want to talk about research, and then I'll hand it over to John?
I mean, I think Jack pretty much summed it up. I mean, I think just to add real quick, the urgency of what happened and the story kind of getting going, like we were definitely, there's a learning curve involved. And so as the process continued, we were able to kind of like settle in and read whole books about the subject and really dive into the literature. And we did amass a small library of Haiti and international economics books that we would kind of share back and forth. Yeah.
Well, and I'll just add in, I know you want to, but that it's interesting too, because, and I think we see this a lot of time, even right now, or just any day, it's like, Dinesh and I were there and Tim was there, and there were some other folks part of Haiti School Project who were there. And so we were looking at the same problem, how do you build a school, and pulling wildly different conclusions from that. And that got really complicated / interesting because they had a point of view, and it started, I would say, where Tim and I were probably closer in our understanding of what are the base conditions on the ground, what is causing those things, and what are the solutions. And then as the project went on over 7, 8, 9, 10 years, like you start to drift apart. So by the time I'm actually editing the film, my views and his views are different, which is fine. But it's just interesting because it creates a lot that can create some interesting conflict or tension. Not bad necessarily, just tension. I think needed tension, especially in the international economic aid space, because the dialogue is sometimes not really had. And so I think it does make for some very interesting conversations. The other contributing factor is that there's Tim on one side, and then really, if you want to make it about sides, which we don't really want to do, but it's Tim on one side and Samplit's on the other side. And then we were bouncing between the two, and that always created some interesting tension as well.
Indeed. All right, John.
I don't know if this is a form or content question. It's really both. But I'm always fascinated when I watch a documentary like this, what difference the camera makes in what happens. That is, in the behavior of the principals involved. What difference do you think you make in the picture of the result of building the school?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the essential question of documentary, right? It's like almost like I'm going to butcher this, but like, what is it? Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, right? Like looking at a phenomena changes the phenomena, but
yes,
we don't know what it would look like without the camera there. So it's like, we don't actually know what the phenomena is. So I think, so part of it is like, I think, especially in 2023, people are really, really savvy at performing a version of themselves, right? Social media, just et cetera. Like we have become really, really accustomed to this, and cameras aren't like as novel or as different as they had been in the early history of documentary. That being said, I think Jack did a really, really excellent job of just kind of, we spent a lot of time in the community. We were just there a lot. A lot of that 300 hours of footage is just like me sitting around recording like roosters because there's not a lot of other stuff going on. We had this kind of ongoing joke of me trying to get a rooster actually crowing on camera.
Which did not
happen. Did not. They're very camera.
In post-production, we added the rooster crow in the shot to make it lies.
Yeah.
It's all lies.
With that being said, so like I think part of that is just building that kind of trust where folks like Tim, folks like Sam Please, just the villagers in general, like it wasn't novel to see us there after however many months over the span of years. And then we were able to get kind of beneath or behind that performativity. But it takes a lot of time. And even then it's like, you're never really gonna get to some kind of essence, right? If that even exists. But the cool thing about the film is that we just kind of bounce these performativities off of each other, right? Tim's idea of who he is versus Sam Police's idea of who he is. And then as those change, we can kind of make meaning out of surfaces, right? The film is kind of like a hall of mirrors, if you think about it. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that probably when I was younger thinking about this, it would be like you'd want a piece of footage that is true or honest or truly authentic to the question you're sort of getting at. And I don't know if that ever exists, but I do think in editing and putting them all in juxtaposition, that is where you reveal the truth in some ways. I think probably the biggest moment in the film is when Sam Police says, "We are not dogs," and the big blow up. And that's arguably quite performative for camera. It also feels very organic and truthful. So that's one of those moments where it sort of is in between these zones of, is he performing for us, or is he not performing? Is this just honest? And yeah, but it's a great question. That is the number one question. Yeah. What they always say is they want, I don't know if you even believe this is true. We used to talk about, but like the idea is that you want your subjects to forget that the camera's rolling. Do you think that's?
I think it can happen.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I was curious about at what point did you decide to go to Fort Lauderdale for that particular NGO that was funding a lot of different things? When did you think we need to talk to them? And then how did you set up those meetings?
So to refresh everyone, the school that was in Villard was being funded by a local organization called Cross Internet. No.
Foyer de Vin.
Foyer de Vin, thank you, Dinesh. Foyer de Vin, which is a collection of schools that was being funded by an international organization called Cross International, which is Baptist Ministries. And they do like $300 to $500 million a year in sort of giving, both in kind and cash. And that goes out around the world. to Haiti is one of them, but a number of other places. From the get-go, pretty early on, we knew we wanted to try to like follow the money, for lack of a better word, and try to see like, a small school project in a rural area might seem completely disconnected, but that's not true. It's actually not true in any of these projects anywhere. So part of it was just trying to understand like what are the different levels that exist in that. And so we filmed that in 2016, I think, is what my memory is of that. Maybe it was 2017. No,
it was like 15 or 16.
Yeah, 16. And then that was pretty simple. We had known Tim and we knew the in-country representative, and Zach. We asked if we could film him. He said no, and we said okay, it's fine. And then he sent us up to the guy, and Jim Kavanaugh, who's the guy in the film, was the president at the time of Cross International. We said, hey, can we film you? And he said yes, which is sort of shocking, to be totally honest, but he said yes. And so we booked our flights and went to Fort Lauderdale. And then when you're there, you're just like, how do you make the most out of this thing? And we're not journalists, and there's no trying to got you moments, but there were opportunities and a bit of a try to got you moment that did sort of reveal itself in the course of documenting him.
All right, I want to open it back up to you all. What are your thoughts? Maybe we can talk about content, but really whatever is on your mind. These are open, wonderful talkers, and they are excited to hear your comments. So I'll come to you, Julie, and then I'll go to Polly.
So my question's about the storyline, because Dinesh, you'd mentioned, sort of creating this arc, but you also mentioned there were several pivots in the story as you were filming through all these years. So what was the most surprising, aha or pivot or moment?
I don't want to hear, having watched the film, what was the most surprising moment to you? And then we'll share what was.
I think one of them that I thought, there were several, but one was the fact about having a home and having a school provided an opportunity for these people to get a visa, and he wanted to go to New Jersey.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the biggest one is finding out that Simplice wasn't actually a pastor. I mean, that's one. It's like, I'm sorry, what? So that was the biggest reversal. But it's like you're there, and part of it is that you're coming in, and we try to talk about this in the film, but it's like you're coming in with all of our preconceived notions and all of our baggage and all of our ways of viewing Haiti and a place like Haiti, which is just wrong, just 100% wrong. We're all wrong. We don't know what is actually going on down there. So part of it's going down, and then it just sort of slowly. And I think the first couple trips down, you don't really, it's happening, but you're not seeing it because you're blinded by your own ignorance. And then it starts, the more time you spend there, and then some bigger things start to happen. And then you go back and like, oh, this has been sort of like eroding from the get-go. Like what I thought was happening down here I was always wrong. And then it's sort of, so it's hard. It's not like a necessarily a moment, but it's almost like a crossfade or just like a growing list of evidence where it's like, yeah, this isn't right. And it's not adding up to what I thought this place should be based on what the media has told me.
Yeah, I forget the exact language, but there's like, if you spend a week in Haiti, you're an expert. If you spend a year, you don't know anything, right? Like, so just the more time you spend, it's kind of less. I would say from a storytelling perspective, I think, yeah, obviously the moment, like you can kind of hear how shocked we are when we find out that Simplice is not a pastor. But I will say that, like, part of me is just still impressed that the school actually got built, right? Like that seemed like a foregone conclusion, especially with the title and looking back 10 years. But I mean, there were a lot of moments where I was like, I'd be surprised if it were to happen, right? Just how many kind of challenges that Tim met and kind of found ways to surmount.
Yeah.
I'll take the mic over to Polly, and then I'll keep making the rounds.
I have not yet seen the film, so pardon my ignorance if this question is revealed in the film, but I just going back to the very beginning, how did this get on your radar initially? Is there a personal relationship? Was it the country? Is it the topic? How did you first become interested in making this?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just say, if you haven't watched the film, the Simplice thing doesn't ruin the movie. You should still watch the movie because it's still good. Maybe it actually makes it better. I think if you watch it twice, it changes the second viewing once you know that information. So I think I hit on this up top, but just to sort of answer your question, the earthquake happened in 2010 in Port-au-Prince, and we all heard it on the radio and was just sort of horrified by what was happening down there. And that for me was the beginning. And I was like, this is horrible. But the story that was coming out was that American can-doism, like exceptionalism, like we can go down and we can actually make a meaningful impact. And there was characters like Sean Penn going down, like solo dudes going down and, getting his hands dirty. And I think that does play into Tim's thinking to a certain extent. I mean, we never really talked about Sean Penn, but that sort of idea that this like privileged white guy can go down and just like fix everything is like deeply alluring, I think. For white dudes. And so I think that was going on at the same time. So that was all happening, and that's 2010. And then NPR had a program called Planet Money, and they were investigating rice donations and how this sort of talking about how it's not, and I don't want to get into that. It's a whole nother documentary. And they found the school in Villard. So they were starting in Port-au-Prince, and they're like, let's go to where all the rice is grown. And Artibonite Valley is where it's the bread basket, the rice basket. And they found this woman, Madame Honorable, and she was like, oh, I'm trying to sell my rice and I can't sell my rice anymore because the US is sending all this rice for free. So they've undercut the market, which is partially true. It's also been happening since Bill Clinton was in office. So it's been happening for 20 years, whatever, 30 years. So true-ish. But then the school they're investigating the school like, oh, they just want to build a new school. And that's when then Tim got involved. And when Tim got involved as an American, I heard it and was like, oh, I can follow him. And I found him on the internet, him and Fred. He had a partner in crime, Fred. And I was driving in my car when I heard the story. This is like the longest NPR driveway moment ever, is what we say. Is because I was driving in my car. They were just doing a normal Planet Money. And then like, oh, we have an update from Haiti. Like Tim, this guy from Colorado is going to build the school. And I was in my car and I was like, and I like drove home, found them on the internet, called them and met them in the Port-au-Prince airport 2 months later. And that was June 2011. So about a year had passed since then. Yeah, about a year had passed since then.
Dinesh, did you want to speak to this, or should I take the next question?
No, I mean, it's the Randolph. It was the intelligentsia on Randolph that's how I got involved.
Right.
I got lured in with free coffee. I actually don't even think I think I paid for the coffee. It wasn't even a free cup of coffee. But yeah.
Well, we've been talking about it because we were on that committee. And
yeah.
I was like, hey, I'm doing this.
Yeah, Jack and I knew each other from the kind of Chicago film community. We were both on an advisory board for the film festival. But yeah, it was really Jack kind of he kind of got involved and then kind of brought me in, and then what I thought was going to be a few year process ended up being a much longer process. Yeah.
All right. So who else had a hand up? I'll go to Sam and then back to Anne.
Hi, my name's Sam, and I will say the same thing that Polly said, which is I have not watched the movie, but I just got back from St. John on the Virgin Islands. And I can tell you that schools that were destroyed in the double hurricane of 2017 are still standing empty and broken and condemned. And that's not unusual for the Caribbean. It's kind of at cross purposes to the way we do things here on the mainland, but in the Caribbean, it's just a norm. There's so many complexities. So I look forward to watching your story. I also want to thank you for basically bringing up the ego aspect of the story. It came through loud and clear when I watched the trailer a couple of weeks ago. And knowing kind of our own observations of what we've seen in the Caribbean from the schools that are demolished and other buildings that are still empty, I thought, seen that before. So thank you for that. But I do have a non-film question, but a research question for you. And this is one that has been at the back of my mind for decades. When you look at the island and you see the dividing line down the middle, and you see Haiti to the west and the Dominican Republic to the east, I would like to know, did you actually go to the DR to get your feet on the ground there to see what life is lived like on that side of the island? And did you do much research at all into the Dominican Republic?
So we didn't go to DR for the film. I don't know if you've been there. There's a book by, I think, Darren Acemoglu, development economist. He was at MIT. I don't know where he is now. It's called Why Nations Fail. And so he actually has a couple of chapters about, and he actually uses this as almost like as an economist, almost like as a control, right? It's the same, like there's so much similarities because they're on the same island. Why did Haiti, why did things occur in this particular way as well? We aren't economists. We definitely read a bunch, and weirdly, because of where I went to college, I have a lot of friends who are economists somehow. But we talked to a lot of folks, and we kind of gathered a lot of this. And at the risk of turning this into an economics lecture, I'll pull back from that and just say that I think or at least I concluded that a lot of this was kind of so multifactorial. Like, yeah, they're the economic frameworks of asking questions, but there's also this huge political and historical significance, right? Like, and we get into it in the film with, Haiti being a nation of freed enslaved people, and how that played out in the 2 centuries afterwards as well. So I think it's very, very complicated is the short version. So kind of an unsatisfying answer.
I'll jump in and try to make it more unsatisfying. Did not go to DR. No, that's right. I think one of the things that you bring up that's interesting when you talk about, you see this in St. John, and this is one of the things that came up in the film as well. And it seems maybe counterintuitive or maybe really obvious, where it's like we talk about building a school, but Fabienne brings this up, but like what happens in the school? It's like a school is a building. So, I'm working on a project right now, not to tangent too much about public art. We're trying to do this thing called Wabash Lights, and it's like putting lights on the Wabash L tracks in the loop. And it's an exercise in what's called placemaking. And we might not know what placemaking is, but placemaking is essentially this idea of activating the idea that a house is a space, but a home is a place. And so what makes a space a place is emotional attachments to things. And so when you take that idea and sort of go a little bit larger than that, you kind of come to a very controversial question as it pertains to Haiti, or this school being built in Haiti, which is like, why did we even build a school in the first place? Like, what if they spent $125,000 on teacher training or better, organizational stuff? Why is the school that you're talking about in St. John been attacked, hit by a hurricane, and now it's sitting empty? Maybe those kids are actually still getting an education, just not in that building. Maybe they've moved. So it's so obvious, but not in when we think about buildings. I mean, you guys probably deal with this with the facilities. It's just like there's the facility, and the facility is the manifestation of the people in the building. But when you deal with international economic aid, that adds another factor on top of it, because also one of the things I think that we've felt is that you run into a problem where let's say you have a community that's in need, just fill in the blank community that's in need, and you have a community of people who have capacity. From the second that they come in and say, hey, we want to help your community, the whole dynamic is messed up, because maybe they are coming in with a preconceived notion that they even need help and they want to do it. So it's like this saying that, to a hammer, every problem is a nail. Like if Tim's going to come in anywhere, Tim's going to come and build a school because he's like, that's what I do. I build things, right? But even if you don't need a school built, right? So a lot of times these projects happen and it's like, why did this happen? Who asked for it? Is it actually grown from the community? As we think about how do we do work in international economic aid or even aid in our own communities, how are we approaching these communities? Are we actually saying like, do you need this? How are we even phrasing the question of, do you need this? Maybe they don't need anything. Maybe what they need, they can't ask you for. I mean, it just gets multifaceted and very complicated very quickly. But just to sort of add that into the mix as well.
Yeah,
I got Dinesh going.
These are conversations we are having as a church all the time. So yeah, did you want to add one more thing?
I can make my answer out just a little bit more satisfying, because Acemoglu's thesis, which I didn't actually unpack, was basically a stable political system, right? Like he looks at a lot of these case studies and he looking at Haiti, looking at DR. The big difference to him is accountable, functional political systems that kind of empower people to kind of actively participate in communities. So that's a little bit more. So.
All right, I'm going to go to Rebecca and then I'm going to come back to you, Anne.
While you're walking, I'm going to keep talking.
Okay.
And the other thing is that, we see this nowadays right now, and I don't really have a problem with Joe Biden, but when the coup happened in Haiti last year, and he's like, we don't want to get involved in Haiti, we're already involved. We've been involved. So to now say, and this happens time after time around the world, when we say, oh, we don't want to get involved, that's too late. Ship's already sailed. Yes. And so, yeah, that's all that. That's my soapbox. I'm getting off soapbox.
I found the film very discouraging. And I doubt that was your intent when you started. And I doubt that it's the intent of the Adult Ed Committee to discourage us from philanthropy. The film is long, and it is, as I say, dispiriting and discouraging. And at the very end, the credits say that Tim, even though it looked like he'd given up, wasn't ever going back, discouraged, angry with people, went back, and then 20 more schools have been built. So what was your intent, and what intent should we take away from this session?
That's great. Great question. Great. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on it. I guess I'd be curious to hear why you think it's discouraging.
Because philanthropy doesn't work.
You want to jump?
I can start, and then I think our intent was to invert and question the typical NGO film. And because I think we've all seen versions of a film where Jack kind of alluded to it, right? Where some outsider has resources and comes into a community and does this thing, and they're celebrated, and it seems like all the problems of that community are solved. When in reality, these stories are much, much more complicated, right? Like you come back a year later, you come back however long, you turn the camera around, and all of a sudden these things are much more complicated. So I think part of it was we just wanted to make a really, really honest film. We didn't know how it was going to end when it started. And I think and Jack, maybe you can speak to a little bit about the kind of the multiple perspective storytelling and how we really tried to make it open to interpretation, where I think some people look at it and they see Tim's journey as ultimately a journey that they can learn from, right? Ultimately a journey where you don't necessarily have to make those same mistakes that Tim did. And you can maybe go into thinking about aid and development with a little bit, having learned from his lesson, right? This decade-long lesson. And there's some other perspectives in there too that we could get into, like if you are somebody like Sam Police, or if you are somebody in Port-au-Prince, and how thinking about all these NGOs, people coming in from the outside, like there are, I think, multiple kind of perspectives to be taken in the film. And yeah, Jack.
What was I going to say? Gosh.
Actually, well, while you think, can I jump in as the person who coordinated and the adult ed rep? I'd also love to answer that question. In terms of intent, we at Fourth are rethinking how we do everything. We are rethinking our relationships. We are rethinking our relations to each other. And we are a legacy church with a lot of history, which I happen to know a lot about as one of the church historians. And when I saw this film, I thought, as somebody who also grew up in multiple denominations and went on mission trips, I thought this film is going to help us rethink who we are and how we relate. And while, yes, a lot of the film is dark and a little disillusioning, I felt like confronting that honesty with a lot of what we have going on in our city, which the news is often dark. We have a lot of tough things going on. And if I believe that when we are more honest about the darkness and perhaps about our history, we can rethink who we are and who we want to be and how we live into Christ's kingdom. I love the idea that we can always be reforming and always be rethinking mission. And I thought this film would help us do that. But hand it back to Jack.
That's yes. To respond to one thing you said, is the film different now than when it started? 100%. But I think what I thought the film was going to be when I started was born out of deep ignorance. I thought we were literally saying in meetings, Tim, Fred, and me, non-ironically, that when they build this school, it's going to fix Haiti. That was said and believed. And that's insane. You're laughing at me now. That's okay. You can laugh at me. That's good. That means you get it. So yes, it changed. That's absolutely true. Then it moved into, I want to make this movie for the next Tim Myers. And I still believe that. And I would want the next Tim Myers to watch this film because I want someone, look, it's the most hopefully best version of humanity when you see people hurting and you're like, I want to help. How do we help? We don't want to say no to that. I don't want to say no to that. Dinesh doesn't want to say no to that. But also going in with misaligned preconceptions does not help and probably hurts more. And so that's another thing I would throw in there as well. So it's like, we're making this for the next Tim Myers. And then we play with the title. So the title is actually, it's not How to Build a School in Haiti. And so this is my normal stock answer for this, is that it's not How to Build a School in Haiti, which was the name of the original NPR podcast. And we decided to take that and make that the title of the film for a long time. For a long time, this was called How to Build a School in Haiti. And then it moved, the more we made it, we're like, oh man, are we making How Not to Build a School in Haiti? And so, but then we ended on, if you look at it, it's how parenthetical not to build a school in Haiti. And it's intentionally in like a liminal space. It's intentionally both of those things, neither of those things. It could be one of those things. We get people who watch this film who say, this is not good. This is dispiriting to philanthropy. We have people who watch the film who say this is a horror movie. Like if you're a Haitian, like this is a horror movie. You're watching a horror movie, and the ending is even worse because he comes back and built more schools, right? So and that's okay. And so the idea is to try to talk about all these things. But the other thing that I believe that I've discovered through the process, which I feel very strongly, is that most of the time when people do this and they come in hot and heavy, and then they see that it's harder than they thought. What do? They quit. And the moment that they quit is actually the moment they're at their most powerful because they finally understand what is required to do this work, and then they walk away. And when you walk away, you're not, because you've taken all of that knowledge that you've learned and you're just moving on to the next whatever. And one of the things that Tim gets credit for, I think Tim actually gets credit for a lot of things here. One is he didn't walk away, right? And the film is intentionally sort of built to play with your emotions in that regard. I mean, the ending, we were talking about it beforehand, it's like a surprise ending. It's like, wait, this guy's going back, he's moving to Haiti, and then he's building 20 more schools. Like, what? That's crazy, you know? But he did the right thing, is he went back and he recommitted, even though knowing how hard it was, and even though knowing all of these other things. The other thing I'd say, and we don't get into this as much because we just didn't, it's 90 minutes, and we wanted to try to keep the film as tight as possible. But when they started doing it, they were going to build a school and they were going to do teacher training. And one of the things that they decided through the process, and this might sound counterintuitive, is they ditched teacher training. They said, we're not doing teacher training anymore. And you might be like, well, that sounds wrong. They should do teacher training. But I actually think it's the better version of if you're a hammer, every problem's a nail. Tim doesn't know how to train teachers. He knows how to build buildings. And so these 20 plus buildings that they've built since then are with NGOs that are already set up, that are doing all the fundraising, that are vetted and already working in communities. And really, he's just coming in as like a contractor. Like when you guys built this building, you didn't build it, right? You hired someone. So Tim's coming in as an expert, as someone on the ground. And I think if we're looking at international economic aid and how these things work, like that seems to me to be a better way to do the work to a certain extent. So that's long answer. It's a great question. I mean, that's like sort of why we made the film, is like to have these conversations.
Yeah, I was just going to underscore that last sentence that Jack said, which is a big part of it is to have these conversations, and like the one happening in this room. And we've done a lot of screenings with Engineers Without Borders and NGO groups, or small groups that are thinking about doing aid projects. So to make a film as nuanced as this, it doesn't end with the credits, right? It ends with a conversation and hopefully takeaways happening from there.
Great. Okay. I promised Anne I would come back to her, and then I see a hand there and a hand there. So we're going to try to get to all three. So I'm going to keep you two real short so we can get all three of these.
Sorry.
No, you're great.
Okay, I'm going to talk real fast. And the first thing is I'm going to tell a quick story. I raised my son in this church. He worked at Sunday night supper. He worked a lot with the homeless. My ex-husband walked out my front door and with the dog and didn't come home. After my son went off to college, he and I were both devastated. We decided the way to get ourselves better was to go help other people. So we went to, it was vetted by the church. We went to an organization headquartered in Arusha, Tanzania. We spent the summer there. And I think our summer was very much like Tim's situation. We learned, we didn't necessarily help. But from there, my son went to major in political economics. He ended up at the Kennedy School of Government. He ran the US Global Health Portfolio. Now he runs COVAX and Gavi here in the US. So you can learn, just like Tim learned. And people who were in this church, like my kid, learned. But my real question, there is a question related to that, is why didn't you call it, can Americans go elsewhere, and cross out help and write learn?
Yeah, it's good. I have no answer, but thank you for
Write that
sharing your
down.
story.
She just gave you a new
That's the
title
next
for your
movie,
next
yeah.
one.
That's the sequel. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that story. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
And you had to keep your lips zipped because you knew more than we did.
Yeah, I think we learned along the way with him. One of the things that's interesting about documentary and the rhetorical device that we use in this film, there's two things that we do in this film. One is anytime you think you understand what's going on, we reverse it. And that's intentional. So it's like, okay, I got it. And then it's like, here's something. And so it's constantly getting undercut and turned around. So it turns into just this like soup of confusion. And then the second thing was that because we're making because of the way just time works, right? Like we can go back and we can reframe something that happened given the context of having known the entire experience. And that's just sort of storytelling tricks. Yeah.
Dinesh, did you want to weigh in or should I move on? Okay, I'm going to come over here.
Quick question. The government is obviously a large amount of money, but are NGOs more effective, you think, on the ground than government to government, or how do you relate government institutional versus NGO funding?
Specifically in Haiti, or just kind of writ large in the development?
Haiti, but then in general too.
So I think, there's a moment in the film where they talk about Haiti being described as the republic of NGOs. And that's because because of a lot of structural historical problems, NGOs have really moved in to fill in a lot of these basic needs and services, fulfilling needs and services that a government would normally provide. So, I mean, I think it's complicated, right? Like, oftentimes these countries, they don't necessarily have the resources to solve problems on their own. So some kind of outside NGO help is necessary. I don't know a ton about it, but I believe for Rwanda for a while had this program where every NGO had to coordinate, had to register with the government, and they kicked them all out. And then you had to reapply, and they were just a lot more intentional about working with NGOs as well. So I do think it's like that tension that you've identified is really, really important. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when the earthquake happened, I can't remember the number. Was it 5 billion, 7 billion? Do you remember it? Let's just say it was $5 billion. The numbers coming out, it's like, and United States government, says we're going to give $5 billion to Haiti. They didn't give. Almost none of that money ended up actually going to Haiti. And this happens a lot of the times with government, because what they'll do is, there's like a floating hospital. I can't remember the name of it, the USS Comfort or something like that. Oh, thank you. So when they say we're going to give $5 billion to Haiti, what they mean is we're going to spend $500 million to send the USS Hope to dock outside, and you're not going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it. But we're going to say that we're sending that money to Haiti. So when you see like we spent $5 million on Haiti, why didn't we fix it? Like that's how the media talks about it. And it's just a misconception. Like that's not true. The US government after the earthquake did give some money to the Haitian government. It was not $5 billion. It wasn't even $1 billion. It was hundreds of millions. And then usually what people say is like, well, it's incredibly corrupt, right? And yeah, it is very corrupt and they're stealing. That is 100% true. But even then, like you're saying of the $500 million we gave to the government, that's a fraction of 5 billion or whatever. So the thing that the issue in Haiti is that we're definitely in a chicken and egg situation where it's like the central government is very weak. And so no one wants to give it money. It's also corrupt. So we're going to support NGOs, but that further does not strengthen. And so there's no long-term plan right now in Haiti to get them out of this sort of, I don't want to say death spiral, but out of this loop, I would say.
All right, Margie.
I think that question was related to my question, which is kind of one of the things I appreciated about the film is that it's about Haiti, but it's really more about like turning like what does the mirror look like, and it's not good. And I was wondering about kind of like individuals within systems, because it seems like in some respect one of the problems is like we have this impulse to like, oh, I see suffering and I have way more wealth than I deserve or whatever, and so I'm going to go do something, versus like we're not. I guess my concern is, or my question is, how much of this is this a problem of an individual, and how much of it is a problem of us not putting in the work to like change like our own country, and like the way that these like putting pressure on like our government to not, to not say, oh, we're giving this money, but really that's not what's happening. And how much like should we really be I don't know, like if there was a prescription, I know there's not one, but like for things that we can do as individual citizens, like, and thinking about in our own country, like what we could change.
Yeah, and you sort of you hit on something that we were very intentional on, and this is connecting to something Dinesh said earlier, is like we intentionally did not want to be prescriptive or proscriptive in the film. And 99% of these movies that you've seen are prescriptive. It's like, here's what you need to do. Here's the website you can go to that's going to fix it all. And we did not want to do that. And I understand that could be frustrating and unsatisfying, but it was intentional. I don't know. I think Tim would talk about this a lot because he would be going around. He lived in Carbondale. He worked in Aspen. Aspen's a very affluent area. And, basically he'd be like, I'm doing this school in Haiti. And everyone would be like, why don't you work on schools here? And and he had an answer for it, which is, people in Haiti are far worse off than they are in America. But it's sort of, that's getting into the details. It's like, how do you even choose who to help and why to help them? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know if we should even scrutinize that maybe too much. Maybe we should. I don't know. Dinesh, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just broadly, and I feel like just as a kind of culture, we've gotten a lot more savvy in terms of thinking about things in terms of structures, right? And just acknowledging just how much kind of history and patterns and points of view. Like, I think when we started 10 years ago, we were, I think, and there still is largely people, kind of prescribing like this is the solution, right? But I just think that things have gotten a lot more nuanced. I mean, it's a lot messier, but I think something really, really positive will emerge from that. And I don't know if any of us know what that is, but I think that just the fact that we're having these kind of really messy conversations is a good sign. So.
I am reminded of a conversation I had when I was doing research on our church history about the 1960s under Elam Davies, when our church went in a major new direction, right? Our social services was really born then in the 1960s. And there was this huge new idea that maybe Fourth Presbyterian Church shouldn't be just an institution, but serving the least, the last, and the lonely. And that was an amazing moment, and it changed our history. And I feel as though, quite strongly, that we're at another moment where the thing we did doesn't quite apply and doesn't quite work. And I feel like this film talks about that first. So in using Rebecca's phrasing, philanthropy doesn't work. No, not like it used to, if it ever did. But now is an incredible moment to rethink it and rethink who we are so that we're conversing about not just our discernment and our use of resources, but our relationship to one another. So I want to thank these two filmmakers for making the movie and sharing it with us so generously. It was wonderful to have you all here today. Thank you for coming. And will you pray with me? Dear Jesus, thank you so much for this moment. Thank you for these conversations. Thank you for art. Help us see into our own hearts and love each other better through you and through each other. Amen. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.